Welcome to the course introduction, Microsoft Windows Server 2008 Administration Part 2. My name is Michael Kraut. I'm with Idea Dudes, and I'm going to be the instructor for this course. Now, Windows and Windows servers are registered trademarks of the Microsoft Corporation. We're going to look at planning and managing file and print servers, planning data provisioning, planning server management, planning monitoring, and performance optimization. Planning delegation, planning Windows Server 2008, patch management, and planning remote access and network protection. Also planning certificate services, planning storage area networks, planning application availability, and planning disaster recovery. I know this is a lot that you're going to be learning. What you need to do is you need to buckle down and get ready for a wild ride. Now, this is all about planning. The 70-646 is all about planning. So you won't be having any questions about implementation. But this will also help you within your real-world experience or your real-world networks. So let's take a look at what are the course objectives. We're going to plan the management of files and print servers. This is what you're going to be able to do. Plan data provisioning. Plan server management, monitoring, and performance optimization. Plan security delegation, plan patch management, availability, and disaster recovery. Plan the storage, remote access, and network protection strategies. So what are the course prerequisites? Well, you should have a solid foundation level understanding of Microsoft Server operating systems and common internet technologies. This will be DNS, DHCP, Active Directory, Microsoft Windows Server 2008 Configuring a Network Infrastructure Parts 1 and 2. Microsoft Windows Server 2008 Configuring Parts 1 and 2. And exam 70-640 to 42 and the 70-643. And Microsoft Windows Server 2008 Administration Part 1. So these are the things that you should have under your belt before you start this course. It'll make it so that you understand the terminology and what we're doing a lot better. So let's sit down and talk about the different modules that we're going to have within this course. Well, we're going to start off with managing file and print servers. Now, we'll be looking at the file system resource manager, which allows us to be able to modify quotas, also file screens, which allows us to be able to protect or determine what type of media or what type of files are going to be able to be saved within our shares. We'll also look at the storage provision, so that way we can determine which type of storage that we want to use for our shares. And also we'll be looking at print servers. And print servers are one of the things that we should pay attention to, because when you implement a printer, you can make it so it's available in Active Directory. And this is known as publishing. We'll also be looking at managing file and print servers part 2, which what it does is it goes back and it looks at more of what we're doing with printers. We'll also look more at the different quotas that we have and quota management for templates, the quota templates, also the file screen templates, and also using the other features of the file server resource manager. Then we'll be looking at provisioning data. When we look at provisioning data, we're going to be looking at DFS, the distributed file system. We'll also be looking at Windows Search Service, which replaces the index service. With DFS, that allows us to be able to provide a redundancy for our shares. And that's the overall theme with provisioning data. We want to provide an environment that is going to be redundant for our clients, so they can get access to that share information whenever they want. We'll be looking at provisioning data part 2, which goes more into DFS and the different technologies such as DFSR, which DFSR is a distributed file system replication. It uses remote differential compression, which what that means is instead of like FRS, all it does is it's going to replicate the data that has changed. And when also we're looking at the replication topology, which the topology is the map that is going to be used by the different nodes that are in a DFS and how they're going to be able to communicate. And we'll talk about the different topologies that we do have. Examples of mesh, and also hub and spoke. And then we'll look at server manager strategies. The server manager, for example, when we add different server roles, what we're going to do is we're going to be able to extend the server manager because we have DLLs that are associated. These DLLs have functions that are associated with the actual server roles that we install. So Active Directory users and computers, group policy management snap-in, Active Directory domains and services, sites and services, domains and trust, the Active Directory site rights management, the federation services, the Active Directory lightweight directory services. They're all going to have tools that are associated with it. We'll also be looking at Microsoft Management Console and PowerShell. Then we'll look at optimizing and monitoring and optimizing performance. And how do we do this? We have the reliability and performance monitor. Reliability will give us an overall history of what's been installed, what's gone on with that server. And then with performance, we have a perfmon, which will allow us to be able to go through and look at the different counters that we do have with the different services that are associated with the different server roles that we put on the server. We'll be looking at delegating authority, which this one's going to be a fun one because this will allow you to be able to delegate responsibility to somebody who doesn't have administrative capabilities so you can go and play golf. And then Windows Server 2008 patch management strategies. This is going to be Windows Server update services. We're also going to give you a little overview of SCCM 2007. Now, this is not a full overview of the product because there's another course that will be for System Center Configuration Manager. When we're looking at planning network access, this is going to be permissions that you have. What happens when you have a shared permission with an NTFS permission? Planning certificate services, we're going to be looking at the root CA, intermediate CAs, enterprise CA, how we can make it more secure to protect our certificate organization. Also, we'll be talking about auto-enrollment, the NDES, we'll be looking at the OCSP and the online responders. And there's a lot more that we'll be covering within certificate services. Planning deployment of the storage area networks, talking about LUNs, looking at iSCSI, also fiber channel. We'll be talking about HBAs and a lot of the different storage fundamentals that we have with storage area networks. Planning server availability, and what we're looking at here is DNS round robin and network load balancing. We're going to contrast and see which is the best. And also we're going to talk about how to plan for implementing these two technologies. We'll look at planning server clustering, and this is where we get into failover clustering. We'll talk about the different quorum models that we do have, and we'll contrast each one and tell you which one is the best to use for certain situations. Planning backup and recovery. This is the Windows backup feature that you install in Windows Server 2008. We'll also be looking at how do we recover from a disaster. And so we'll be looking at some of the things like system state backup. But what we'll be covering is how to plan to use these utilities and what are the different ways and what are the best ways to be able to back up. And that takes us to the disaster recovery, which we look at the DSRM, we look at the database mounting tool, we'll look at different utilities that will help us to be able to bring our environment back up to a usable environment when we do have a disaster. So when we look at the curriculum path, you have Windows Server 2008 Administration Part 1, Part 2, Windows Server 2008 Server Administrator, which is 70-640, 642, and you earn your MCITP by finishing the Administration Part 1, Part 2, which is a 70-646 exam. The labs and exercises can be downloaded from the download section on the course page. If you have any questions or comments, put them in the GoGo box at the bottom of the video. Let's get started.